We are safe arrived at our cottage, which is more beautiful than I thought it and more convenient. It is a perfect model for cottages and I think for palaces of magnificence, only enlarging, not altering its proportions, and adding ornaments and not principles. Nothing can be more grand than its simplicity and usefulness. Simple without intricacy, it seems to be the spontaneous effusion of humanity, congenial to the wants of man. No other formed house can ever please me so well, nor shall I ever be persuaded, I believe, that it can be improved either in beauty or use. That's Blake to Flaxman in a letter on the 21st of September 1800. Um, The cottage was in Felpham, which is to the east of Bognor. When Blake was there were about 71 houses and 300 inhabitants, including children. Today there's about 5,000 houses and 12,000 inhabitants. So I'm going to focus very much tonight on the work to restore the cottage. We've been delighted to be able to give lots and lots of talks about our work throughout Sussex and beyond. But this is, for me, really an important one because just as we're trying to keep the material presence of the cottage alive, the Blake Society for so long has so well kept Blake alive and continues to do so in a tremendous way. So it's a great honour to be able to say something to the Society. The project has been underpinned by some principles, and I like to think that those principles reflect some core principles within Blake himself. He's been claimed, as we all know, by many religious trends, political trends, ideological trends. Some want him as a Swedenborgian, some want him as a nonconformist, some want him as a Neoplatonist, etc., etc. He's claimed in many different ideological ways. But I think there's one root existence of Blake that underpins it all, and that is that he was a skilled artisan. He was part of that radical artisan tradition that goes way back deeply into British and particularly English history. And if you're an artisan, you like to do something well. You get trained to repeat and improve performance, and you make wonderful things with your hands. You are practical as well as imaginative. So that meant that if we wanted to restore the cottage in that artisan spirit, then we wanted to get the very, very best people involved in the restoration work. And we've done that, I think. One of the very best conservation engineers, Ed Morton, literally did the underpinning engineering work for the cottage. Nick Tyson, one of the leading building conservators, he's overseen so much of the archaeology and the construction management that we've done. And then, as we'll see later on, particular trades that we've needed to restore the cottage, we've been able to engage the very best. The artisan tradition believes in doing things collectively, and that's been the underlying spirit that we've had, forming a new board in 2014 with a range of ambassadors to work with us and a range of experts and working groups looking at various elements of the work. So a collective effort, hopefully of significant collective value to the wider community. We have as another principle maximum benefit for the maximum number of people and the maximum engagement that we can get. And there's another principle kind of linked to all of those, which is on the screen now, which is Blake's first picture of the cottage, his drawing. Now, it was our assumption that because he was a printer and he was apprenticed, as we all know, as an engraver, and we know his very early pictures of Westminster Abbey and so on, that he was in the habit, when drawing real things, not those things like the angel descending here from his imagination, but when he was drawing the real world, he did so accurately. So at this stage, just notice the configuration of the cottage. This is looking at the cottage from the south to the north. It's 2 up and 3 down. So there's a front door leading into the cottage, 7 small windows on the main cottage, and a couple on the small single-story extension to what is on the right of your screen, the east. And then just next to that, something that some mistook for being a sailing boat on the sea, but it's not, because it's looking south to north, a water pump. And then behind that, a boundary wall. If Blake was looking in the other direction, to the south, he would have had an unimpeded view of the beautiful Felpham Bay, with the scintillating water that sparkles in the sun there, and where, as he put it, Catherine enjoyed Neptune's embrace. And you'll see also the garden there. So that's as he drew it. I'll just pop down one before coming back. He did another watercolour picture of the cottage. This is again looking up from the sea. I'll zoom in a bit on this in the next slide, but just a couple of things to note. The huge mill on the left, can you see that? That's a mill. And then just to the right of that, the church, which of course is still there, which contains 2 beautiful commemorative stained glass windows for Blake. And then over on the right, you'll see the cottage itself being.
Doug, I think we might be one slide behind you. Can you move on one more slide? We've got a sort of seascape. Oh, I see. Oh, oh yeah. Oh, yes. I can see the detail now. Sorry. Yes, we've got you. Yeah.
This is a difficult picture to see the cottage, so I've zoomed in on the next one, which is his view of the cottage from the south, but further away. And again, you'll notice that it's 2 up and 3 down. We all know that Blake's time at the cottage was inspirational, and that was reflected in so many ways, which many colleagues here today will have recognised. But I like the simple 3-liner, my eyes more and more like a sea without shore, continue expanding. And it's that sense of spiritual, intellectual, artistic growth and expansion that I identify personally with his creative, inspirational time at Felpham. Away to sweet Felpham, for heaven is there, the ladder of angels descends through the air. On the turret its spiral does softly descend, through the village then winds at my cot it does end. And of course, the famous lines from the Auguries of Innocence, which I doubt he could have written without seeing the beautiful seafront at Felpham. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. Now, Felpham is a conservation area, and we've done many studies of the wildlife and the big conservation issues in and around the cottage and its garden. which are particularly important to us as an environmentally friendly board, but also, I think, of great significance if we want to continue another principle. I would argue that was very, very central to Blake, and that was the love of the environment and the protection of wildlife. And what greater early green manifesto do we have than the Auguries of Innocence written in the cottage? The cottage grade 2 is grade 2 star listed in the conservation area. So that means that all of our work is regulated, done in partnership with two fantastic organisations that have regulatory powers. Historic England, whose work, if you're not aware of it, is worth seeing from their website. Fantastic protection of the great heritage sites and buildings of our cultural heritage. And of course, local authorities, through their planning departments, have maintained their role in approving of conservation work on grade 2 listed buildings. I mention those because they've been so central to the protection of our heritage as a nation. So we work and continue to work very closely with them, and they've been a great help to us, as have other organisations like the World Monuments Fund, Architectural Heritage Foundation, and so on, all of whom have got tremendous expertise in conservation and heritage work. So that's the cottage as we've just seen the cottage as Blake drew it and painted it. But for many, I guess, since the Victorian times, this will be one of the predominant images of the cottage as 3 up, 3 down with 3 chimney stacks. And there are many postcards and photographs of the cottage in that form. When we started to build a new board and get very worried about the cottage at the end of 2003, beginning of 2024, this was its condition. It looks better on the photograph than it actually was because you can't see the rotting timbers beneath it. The thatch was about to collapse. It was about to collapse inwards, and as it was collapsing inwards, it was in danger of pushing out the walls and cracking them away from the chimneys. But just to notice here also that the 2 up section on the right of your screen, you can see is in noticeably different flint. It's in the napped flint. And the significance of this was that as we went through, not to spoil the whole story now, but as we went through, this, of course, although it was described by many scholars who visited Blake's cottage, they described it as 3 up, 3 down, and so on. This was a Victorian extension. And you'll see on the end of the building, on your right, which is the east of the building, you'll see 2 things. One, vestiges of the original white lime wash colouring of the outside of the building, which it was for most of its life. And then you'll see the just abutting up to that, you'll see what was put on as a 1969 extension. We had to take urgent action to cover the roof with basic plastic. The weather and the squirrels and the Death Watch beetles were having a very, very bad effect. And you can see on this picture how far down the actual rafters and the ridge of the roof were sinking away from the chimneys. So it was in a parlous condition, not helped, of course, by the fact that the storms increased and intensified over that period. So the plastic coating wasn't enough to save and protect the roof. We had to fundraise very quickly, and we got some fantastic support from World Monuments Fund, Architectural Foundation, Ian Falston Fund, and so on, to start protecting the roof. This is Blake's Road. This is on the west side of the cottage, and we had to start very quickly to get it covered in January 2024, or it would have gone. This is the long. You're looking at the northern side of the roof, and you can just get an indication of how bad that was as well. So scaffolding had to go up so that we could begin to not well. We had to protect it inside as well, because if there had been any collapse, it would have gone all the way through. We had to put a tin hat on, and the tin hat had to be weighted down by the ballast of the water there so that it wouldn't blow away, which was just as well because in 2024, this area of the coastline normally would get 4 or so storms over 50 miles an hour. That year we managed to attract about 8, and they were very significantly over 50 miles an hour. But fortunately, the tin hat and its protective skirting enabled us to protect the roof. Just a slight diversion here. If you have been down to Blake's Road, this is what you will see from the roadside. This was not as it was in Blake's time. The archway to the right of your screen was built on later. That was not the original front door. The front door was round at the side, as we've seen, and the bottom window there wasn't there. It was just the small top window that was there when Blake was there, and then the arch on the left we don't think was there either. So where you see the doorway on the right was just in fact a little garden gate where one John Schofield would have entered the garden before their altercation. And just a quick note at this point on the configuration of the cottage. The long slope on the north side is called the outshut, and we're now sure that when we go inside, Blake's printing press was in the outshut to give him the height required by the printing wheel and to keep it away from the fireplace in the centre there of the front room. We're pretty sure that his printing press was just inside there under that window. So that's where that photograph is taken from, is probably just about where his printing press was. So on the left there, you'll see the long slope down of the outshut. The area to the right of that doorway that you see that goes through the cottage, the best guess is that that was all flagged on the right, but probably not flagged with stepping stones on the left. And because there is quite a water and drainage issue around there, there is some, I think, reasonable speculation that water could have flown in down the bare soil area there, and that could possibly have been partially the cause of the ague and the rheumatics that Catherine suffered while she was there. So on the right of your screen, you'll see a dark pillar. There was a wall along there. So the rooms were on the right of this, and in this outshut, there would probably have been storage, as in pantry, storing food, and of course, in their case, artistic materials relating to the printing press. The other new thing for me was that it's likely that in the outshut, Blake would have just looked up at thatch, and in the other rooms, it's very likely, the evidence suggests, that the walls would have been panelled with their equivalent of our modern plasterboard. It was a mud and hair board in their day, and the rafters that we traditionally think that old cottages have as black and dark brown, they would have been lime washed as well. So this is as we covered the roof, we were able to start to inspect it, and the story was not at all good. Everything eaten away and about to collapse. And you'll see the indentation there once we started to remove the thatch, of how imminent the collapse really was. Some of the thatch was on there in Blake's day, some of the bottom layers. It hadn't all been removed, so it was completely friable. You touched it and it fell away to dust. So while we were in the process of surveying the damage, we were also in the process of applying for funding to prioritise a new roof and to prioritise funding that will build the capacity and the professional expertise of the Trust to develop a heritage site and a conservation project. So, thanks to the efforts of our board, and in particular David Clark, who did the work on our initial National Lottery funding bid, we were successful in getting a number of funding streams, and what the lottery call a small grant, which is up to £250,000, which to get it, there are three requirements really. One is that you have to have some significant element of matched funding. So thanks to other trusts, we were able to achieve that. But then, of course, and very rightly, heritage funding, whether it's through the lottery or any of the other trusts, wants you to take into account future sustainability. They don't want to put a roof on if the board and the rest of the building are going to collapse and not have a financially sustainable future. So part of the successful grant application to the lottery was enabling us to employ conservation and specialist architects to do some options appraisal for the future of the cottage and what could go around it to attract visitor audiences and so on. So we were very lucky to get Hugh Broughton Architects and Martin Ashley's, who are very skilled in these areas, to do a lot of work for us on options appraisal. And equally, and very rightly, the lottery and other funders, whether it is Heritage England or Garfield Weston Foundation or any of the others, they want to see not the creation of a living, of a dead museum for a few people to visit, but they want to see community engagement and community worth and extending entitlement to learn about our great cultural figures. So we were also funded to look very carefully at interpretation. What will take place in the cottage and any visitor centre associated with it? How will that engage the primary schools, the secondary schools, the university students, the elderly population, the refugee and migrant communities? and those who have been underserved by cultural experience in the past. And of course, that's music to our ears, because Blake would have wanted us to do that, wouldn't he? To ensure that his only remaining dwelling place is used as an inspirational centre for the imagination and the artistic practice and endeavour and the cultural and heritage interest of as many people as can be. So we were funded also to employ some professionals in those areas, and a project coordinator, Sarah Parker, who has great experience of heritage and projects and literary houses. And we've also had to do a very hard business look at what would sustain um, the cottage in the future. We also had another very interesting excursion as we were desperate to put the roof on. Because we were convinced that um, Blake's drawing of the cottage was accurate as a 3 down, 2 up, we we got a lot of work done on the archaeology of the cottage to see whether his drawing was accurate or not. And cutting a long story short, as you'll see in a minute, we were able to prove and work with Historic England and Arran District Council to get something which I understand is not that common. We were able to get approval to, after we'd had the listed building consent, to put the roof across the whole of the 3 upper rooms. We got a historic building amendment approval to take down the final room, the first story of the final room on the east, so that we could restore it to a single story on the east, as it was in Blake's day. So to get the roof done in the best traditions of artisans, we wanted to go to the best that we could find, and I have to say I think we've been very successful in doing that. So the timber framer is Joe Thompson, who's done fantastic work in Sussex and nationally, one of the most highly regarded timber framers. And we did a big study of the wood, and of course, if the underlying principle that we were working to is to restore the cottage as the Blakes knew it, then we also wanted to try and put the rafters up in the exact order they were in his day, of beech, elm, and ash. To my surprise, the new rafters were sourced uh, directly from local woods. These were from near Pulborough, and they were cut down and brought in green, and they were put up um, after the bark had been removed. That's Joe removing the knots and starting to remove the bark from the wood that was to be made into the new rafters. The section on the left there, where you see the black wall, that's where Blake's printing press, we're absolutely sure where it was. And I did a bit of bark stripping as well, because it's quite good fun. We stripped all the timbers, painted them in the same line wash as the walls, the outside, the inside would have been when Blake was there, and put them up. This is just an indication of how rotten the previous rafters were. This is Ian Anderson, aka Jethro Tull, when he visited recently, looking at one of the rafters that we had to take out. And if you compare the thickness of that with the rafters above his head, that's an indication of what we were left with. And what he's holding was riddled with deathwatch beetle and holes as well. On the south side of the building, the there were so many broken rafters. There was a different conservation approach adopted, and that was to pair up some of the broken rafters with new softwood supports on rafters, so that we're able, if if that's how the next listed buildings consent takes us, we'll be able to get visitors to see some of the original laths and some of the original rafters that were there in Blake's day. It also meant that we, of course, had a lot of masonry work to do. A couple of the chimneys were falling off, so we, through the competitive tendering process that we're required to do through all of these kind of repairs, we were lucky to get Will Cove, who's a young conservation mason in Chichester, and he spent a lot of days mixing various mixes of sand and mortar and lime and so on to ensure, with the guidance of Nick Tyson, that we were actually putting bricks and mortar together that would have more likely than not have been used and had the same chemical composition that they had in Blake's day. And what a good job he's made of what turned out to be a new chimney to the eastern side of the building, because the other one was gone, really. We then had the story of the thatch, and this was, to say the very least, a bit of a headache. We started being hopeful of getting grant funding through for 2025. We started looking for thatch in 2024 because we've been alerted by colleagues at Historic England and elsewhere that there was a huge shortage of British produced grown thatch, which there was because of 3 very bad droughts, 3 years of very bad droughts. And again, on the principle of conserving it with the same materials as was in Blake's day, we had to get 2 particular kinds of largely English grown thatch, and that's made it a little bit more difficult. So we phoned up literally every single thatch supplier in the country that we could get hold of, and we asked them if they had any thatch sufficient to cover the cottage, and they either said no, it's all been sold, or they said yes, we've got a bit left, and then they quoted prices which were just, unaffordable, ridiculous. So we were in a bit of a state of despair. And then someone spoke to Nick, and I think, and said, have we tried K&S Thatchers in Hampshire, in a place which is about an hour drive from the cottage? And we said no. So we tried this person who grew the thatch on his farm, which had been successful in avoiding the worst of the drought because he had so many decades of very densely manured grounds near a river with a high water table, which was retaining a lot of water and moisture. So we phoned him and said, have you got any thatch sufficient to do the cottage? He's in this particular kind of thatch, and he said, yes, as a matter of fact, I have. And because this was before we'd secured any funding to actually do it, I was wondering whether he might, as it was in such demand, save it for us via a contract. And he said, nope, I don't do contracts, I do handshakes. So on the basis of a handshake, he kept us back all of the thatch that was required to eventually thatch the cottage in 2025. That then led to the second problem, because thatch was so short. Master thatchers, bearing in mind our commitment to do things with the most skilled artisans, master thatchers were booked up until 2027. We contacted all of them in this area, went further afield, and everyone was booked up. We would not have got the thatch on until 2027 at least, it seemed. And then, of course, the prices of some of those guys had skyrocketed as well. So I thought I'd try it, and I phoned back the supplier of the thatch and said, "Do you know any master thatchers with availability in 2025 in this particular window of time?" And he said, "Yes, I'm a master of thatcher with 40 years' experience, and I'm available then." So they were able to start work for us, and so the archaeology that Nick Tyson had done, which underpinned our historic building amendment to our plans, um, is well captured in this diagram that he did. So the the original roof listed building consent was to do the whole roof, but the archaeology discovered that the chimney on the left of your screen, which is in blue, that was put on just before Blake arrived. It was attached to the original pink cottage, and our best guess as to why that was put on just before the Blake's time in the mid 18th century. The original pink cottage we think is about 1750. This would have been the blue chimney was put on when we think Bognor and surrounds were beginning to become attractive for people to come and rent near the coast and to visit the coast. And possibly they put the extra chimney in there to make it generally a warmer cottage. So this is looking at the cottage, by the way, again from the southern elevation that Blake could have seen. And then on the right of your screen, just before Blake's time, also in the blue at the bottom was the single story elevation that he drew in that opening couple of pictures that we saw. And the green first floor extension was put on, we think, in the sometime the Victorian period, mid 19th century after Blake had gone. We wanted to be sure, as I've said, about the nature of the wood that was in the cottage. We also wanted to be sure about the colouring of the cottage inside and out. So one of the country's foremost paint analysts has done the work for us in a big report, and we've been able to reveal the different layers of paint and their chemical composition in all parts of the cottage. So it was lime washed inside and out is the long and short of it. So that leaves us with our plan of the cottage, what we want to do in our next phase of renovation, which we haven't got the funding for, haven't done the listed building consent for yet. But this is the general concept, using the principle of restoring the cottage as it was in Blake's day. And that includes the garden. Clearly, vegetable gardens and so on were vital to all cottages in those days. and we're working with some of the great, the garden historians and scientists who we think will be able to tell us pretty accurately what was growing in the garden in 1800. But the basic layout seems to be, to us, like that, more or less, again, as it was with the flower beds that you can see there on the right in Blake's drawing. But that will be analysed further, and all the enzymes and the remaining seeds in the ground will be looked at carefully. And our working group, which we're establishing this month, of various experts and enthusiasts to look at how the cottage and garden will will be presented, will obviously dive into that further. We have, that's the 1969 extension on the eastern wing of the cottage. We have planning permission now to demolish that. That was the work on that was the work when we removed the thatch from the eastern wing of the cottage. And that was it when local volunteers from the Felpham Village Conservation Society removed the first story for us under professional supervision. That was a major and historic and heroic piece of work for 8 or 10 volunteers in a team to take away that first floor Victorian extension. We've kept a lot of the original stone. There's basically the cobblestone, which you'll see on the wall on the right there. There's the napped flint where they chop off the rounded edge of the flintstone. And then, as you'll see on the wall at the bottom next to the window, the white lumps, which are called clunch, and they're basically lumps of clay, of chalk taken out of the south cans. So this was the guys taking off the single story extension. It's gone. That enabled us to get Joe Thompson back to start the work on the timber framing for that extension. And then it also led to a wonderful discovery, which you can see on the right there. See the red bricks on the right. There's a hole in the middle. Go down a bit from the red bricks. You'll see a better picture in a minute, but that is the oven that Blake would have used. Blake and Catherine would have used that oven there. So we're in their kitchen. Joe did his usual brilliant job of putting up the new timber work. Blake would have looked up to thatch. Unfortunately, the insurers won't let us do that for very understandable reasons. We've got to put in this rather gruesome intumescent fireproof membrane. And what our plan is, subject obviously to listed building consent, is that we'll cover that with some of the preserved lath and put plaster on that. So we've got some of the original sort of lath and plaster work preserved in the roof. But that's quite a job. There's his on. And Historic England, of course, they've got colleagues, one of whom will join our working party, who are experts in details like this and how they should be preserved and adapted. So then, when the new rafters were on, the thatch of rusted gold could go on. And it was mainly actually because of the difficulty of access of that single story extension there. It was mainly one thatcher doing that work. You see how thick it is and how it's all bound with the kind of straps that would have been there in Blake's day, made of hazel. The only difference now is that you can't see it very well, but the thatch on the main roof has all the thatch has to be covered with a wire netting to keep Mr. Squirrel away. So that's it today, as it looks this week, with all the scaffolding done, all the thatch on both parts of the cottage now in place, and you'll see how the thatch of rusted gold does go grey pretty quickly over time. The large area of thatch on the left there was put in last September and is already grey. But 2 chimneys and rebuilt and secure. And then listed building consent issues, conservation issues, which our working groups will discuss and have dialogue with Historic England and others about, will be restoring those windows to their original kind of size, restoring that front door, restoring, hopefully, when we find it, a bit of a remnants of water pumps and so on, just at the end of that extension there. So another part of the funding that we received was to rebuild Blake's printing press. And there is one company of skilled cabinet makers who've done this before. I think they worked with Michael Phillips, who is a great expert in Blake's printing techniques and still trains people in them. They worked on this working replica before, and they're doing that again for us now. This working replica is now in the University of Texas. So as far as we know, there is no other working replica of Blake's printing press in Britain. So this will be the first and only. And of course, one thing that we're hoping to do, either in the cottage or in an associated visitor centre, depending on scale and size and so on, is to do classes in Blake's printing techniques, which, as we all know, were, like his paintings, like his poetry, pioneering in inventive and introducing new techniques. So I think that will be a very popular feature. I understand that the Blake Society and others have done work with Michael Phillips, and his classes are very popular. So hopefully we'll be able to restore that part of his work as well. Because of the popularity of the project, and because we've got many valued colleagues in the States and a new advisory committee in the States, we've been donated by the Allen Ginsberg estate his harmonium, which he wrote some tunes to the songs of innocence and experience on, and that's being packed up for us and brought over from New York, where it now is. We have incidentally got some photographs of the sneaky Allen Ginsberg in Blake's garden, taking photographs of the cottage, and that I think must have been the early 70s. So that will be a nice addition to any visitor centre that we have, where the living traditions of Blake are going to be kept alive in one way or another, and there's going to be echoes of those who've been influenced by his work. This is a recent visit to the cottage just last week by Dr. Rebecca Marks, one of our ambassadors, who's a scholar of many things, but including the influences of Renaissance art on Blake. So let's just have a quick look at this. It's only short.
This is the cottage where William Blake wrote Jerusalem, which is England's unofficial national anthem. This small house in Felpham is Blake's only surviving home. This is important. He is one of the most influential figures in British art and poetry. Right now, it's being restored, with plans to open to the public in 2027. Blake lived here between 1800 and 1803, which was the only time he ever left London. In this quiet coastal village, he found new inspiration in the landscape, possibly writing those immortal lines, and did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green. Today, the cottage is a site of national heritage. The Blake Cottage Trust is restoring the house and garden and planning a new education and arts centre. This project is ongoing, and you can support it via the link in my bio or through the Trust's website.
So I just thought I'd put on the last slide the significant question: why are we doing this? We have in Blake, I would argue, our most influential cultural figure. Our most influential cultural figure. As a nation, we've produced many artistic and cultural figures, and many people throughout the world will know William Shakespeare. Many will know William Wordsworth, more or less Blake's contemporary. Many in the arts and crafts and design movement will know William Morris, someone also, I believe, in a very similar tradition to Blake. But can you think of anyone who has influenced not so many artists necessarily on their own, but so many artists, craftspeople, and thinkers in such diverse areas of artistic and cultural endeavour? And I mean, not Blake not just being known as a famous figure like Shakespeare and the others, or indeed like our international patron Bruce Dickinson, who loves Blake and who played to 2.5 million people last year around the world. But Blake influences people, as I guess everyone on this Zoom is a testament to. He influences hearts and minds in ways that no one else does. I mean, technically, he influences printers and painters and poets and thinkers and philosophers, of course, people with a spiritual dimension, people with a political dimension. He influences the minds of young people, and he, of course, keeps scholars busy for a lifetime. But he gets into people's imagination and inspires creativity and human endeavour and positivity in ways that it's really very difficult for me to think anyone else does. So we've got to keep that alive, particularly in a world where there isn't the most peaceful circumstances. And Blake, of course, was part of that movement which opposed the war making between the empires. It's a world still of terrible oppressions, and Blake, as we know, was part of that circle that believed in the equality and rights of women and believed in the protection of children and not their exploitation in the chimneys and the coal mines and the early factories. And of course, he was a great opponent of slavery and so many other progressive causes and ideas which have shaped the better part of humanity. So to protect and preserve and transform this cottage, not just to give an experience of how it was in Blake's day, but to keep alive through objects, interpretations, modern audiovisual work, old-fashioned printing techniques, an understanding of the material that he used and that built the cottage, etc. To keep all of that alive, to fire the imaginations of future generations to go on producing wonderful art and well-being and good interhuman collective relationships seems to me a very worthwhile cause to honour the work of Catherine and William. And our ambition, and this is one of our other principles, our ambition really from the start, given that we've already seen a wonderful exhibition at the Yale Centre for British Art on Blake, we will see a wonderful exhibition at the Morgan Library in New York. I'm sure we'll see great things at the Victoria and Albert. We'll see great things, no doubt, at the Tate and many other places in 2027 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of his death. We've got to be sure that we can at least do something in the little place in Felpham, which so expanded his imagination to expand ours. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm inviting other people to switch on their cameras, and while we're still thinking about what we've heard, Blake, the most influential cultural figure that Britain has, because Blake influences people, you've said, and it really moved me when I heard that Blake influences hearts and minds, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. You've asked the why question. Why is he relevant? And I think, given our audience, this is a question that we all embrace. If Blake is positivity, if he is inspiration, the cottage is an important place to keep alive, allow us to reconnect with what was, and you've also sketched the picture of the future. Thank you so much. Are there any questions to Doug and all that they've done to the cottage? Please raise your hand and I shall invite you to talk. We still have about 30 minutes. Yes, Kim Clancy, please.
Hi, it's not a question, it's just to say thank you so much. I mean, at the moment, being surrounded by so many images of human beings who are so destructive, it's so wonderful to look at you and hear what you're doing. And I just want to say really thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So on my screen, there's three hands. So I'm moving from Hugo, if you start, and then Diane, and then Roger.
Hello?
We can't see you.
No. Never mind. I'll see if I can fix it. Take someone else.
Okay, then Diane.
Hi, Doug. Thank you so much for the talk. It's really lovely to see the cottage coming alive. Yeah, it's very emotional, very inspiring. And I have been fortunate to see the cottage, and I was very curious, particularly about the windows, the ones at the back, that we didn't really touch on very much. What's the understanding about the windows at the back of the cottage and whether they're contemporary with the structure, with the 18th century structure?
So do you mean the two small windows on the north side under the long slope down, the outshut?
Yes, yes.
They one of them was there when Blake was there, and one of them was later.
Not on the side of the building, but when we saw the little video from Culture Dumper, she walks at the back of the cottage, and there's a long window at the back and underneath the long slope. It's particularly that window because I guess as you're explaining it, that's where the printing press would have been. So I'm curious about the lighting.
Yeah,
In that part of the building. Yeah.
certainly wasn't very light, and that window was a Blake window. So, to the best of our knowledge so far, there was the one small window that I showed next to the modern front door on the Blake Road side, which is the west side, and then on the north side, just past the area where we think the printing press was, there's a Blake original window still there.
Okay, thank you. And Hugo, we can see you.
Okay, can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll say to Doug, just a tremendous thank you. What incredible work. I mean, I think the whole Blake Society will be cheering you on and supporting you because it's fantastic. My question is, I'm a landscape architect, so I'm very, very interested in the garden. And we've got at least two major events in the garden. One is in Blake's Milton. There's a great encounter with Ollalon and Milton himself in the garden, and Blake falls prostrate onto the path because he's overcome. And then we have Schofield and the incident with the soldier coming into the garden and the famous that incident. So I'm just wondering how some of those events might be evoked or captured in whatever you do with the garden.
Well, these days you can have uh, virtual immersive reality in the garden and in the building with Schofield and fighting each other in virtual reality. Um, and you can have angels in the sky and projected against the building. We did project some angels over the Christmas service period in the local church onto the roof and inside the church. So there's incredible things that you can do with immersive reality these days to create living images of scenes and events, and that will have to be considered. Many of the heritage projects employ actors to recreate certain
Uh-huh.
scenes.
Uh-huh.
So that's something that no doubt we'll be looking at. But that whole question of interpretation, what's going in the building, what it's going to look like outside, what landscaping will be in the garden, will be analysed and suggested by a new working group which has got about
Hmm.
12
Hmm.
on it. And we're open to suggestions of other people to join those working groups as well.
Hmm. Is it possible to join those working groups?
Yeah, they are. Yes, they're online. They're online. So if people just drop me a note if they've got a particular interest. We've got three groups. One is looking at the material restoration and compliance and regulatory nature of the restoration of the building.
Hmm.
One's looking at interpretation and what's going to be there and what's going to be in the garden, etc. And then one's looking at events for 2027. But please feel free to drop me a note if
Yeah.
you could contribute to those. I'll meet monthly online.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Hugo and Doug, you must connect outside or beyond this meeting because Hugo Laman, as you will hopefully remember, contributed to VALA, the Journal of the Blake Society. And I think there is more to be talked about. Thank you, Hugo.
Thank you very much.
Then it's Roger and then Diane, please.
Uh, Thank you. Thank you, Doug, for that very interesting presentation. I think yourself and the Cottage Trust board need to be congratulated on the excellent work you've done. I think it's truly fantastic, and you preserved the historical aspects of the building, which I'm really very impressed with. I had the pleasure of visiting the cottage and meeting you in December, and at that time you mentioned about the visitor centre, which you've alluded to today. I'm just wondering whether there's been any progress on the building of that and how you plan to open the cottage to the public, next year.
Okay, so there won't be a new visitor centre on the site next year.
Ah,
Absolute priority has to be getting in significant funds to restore the cottage, which we can do if the funds we can do by some point in 27 if funds are released by July this year, probably.
Mhm.
But that over the last 2 months and for the next month, we're kind of full-time funding application writing. The options appraisal and other local developments mean that we've got 10 or so options to look for visitor centres. We've had to opportunistically look at some very interesting recent options, but we've not had the money to make any of them real. There's quite an interesting sort of cultural revival, heritage revival going on around Bognor and Sussex at the moment. Bognor, Felpham, Sussex, as you know, have attracted lots of creatives over the years. Bognor has needed a cultural strategy. It now has one, supported by Arran District Council. It's putting in for a bid to become a town of culture in 28. So there's quite a revival of a feeling that we need to make the most of existing cultural heritage, but also create new heritage. And we're just having to watch that ground and fundraise as hard as we can to make some reality of it. I mean, Dante Gabriel Rossetti came to Bognor for a year because he knew Blake had been here, and he did some paintings here. And James Joyce, he came down to Bognor as well, and wrote some of the key sections of Finnegan's Wake. And my understanding is that, I mean, he was a Blake fan, but my understanding is part of his motivation, apart from perhaps avoiding some tax liabilities, was to come down and see the sea air, feel the sea air that Blake felt. So we've got to make the best of these things quickly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Diane.
First of all, congratulations. And it's just a wonderful story how you've overcome so many problems. And I can't wait to visit when it's open. I'm a trustee who works on events. So in a way, my question's overlapping with Roger's, but I'll expand on it anyway. The visitor centre won't be open for 2027, but I note that you're already putting feelers out. You've done talks with schools and so forth, and I just feel you've got amazing potential, not just the life that Blake and Catherine lived there, the works that were written, the response to the sea, and also we were talking about Portsmouth, for instance, the interesting thing that the part of Sussex was full of soldiers like Schofield, that Portsmouth was a centre for the war effort. And so I just feel you could interest so many different people. So I don't know if you've got plans for 2027 that are more outside the cottage. And I'm also really interested that you had professional help looking at community involvement, looking at bringing in, for instance, refugees or perhaps unemployed people, absolutely the people that Blake would want to be involved. So I'm very interested just to hear a little about those discussions.
Okay, so the working group that we've established will flesh and plan all of that out. We've had lots of discussions with lots of community organisations. So that's ranged from the very good and very active Bognor History Society, the Bognor Arts and Culture Partnership, and a whole range of history societies throughout Sussex. Of course, the Women's Institute still sing Jerusalem, so I think I've been to practically all of the Women's Institute branches in Sussex to talk about it. One of our trustees is a school teacher, and she's responsible for beginning to do work with primaries and secondaries. One of our ambassadors is the provost of the Chichester University, so we'll be able to link into the university dimension. We work with Blake Fest, which does the annual Blake Festival here, Rachel Searle and so on, and they do many exciting activities. And we are planning events because many of the events that we want to do will not be possible in the cottage. They will be bigger. So, as a clue, we're having good discussions with the local church and just beginning discussions with the Chichester Cathedral because we hope that the churches will want to celebrate with us in 2027 across the denominations, of course. And I used to go to a youth club in Bognor called the 39th Youth Club, which was brilliant and gave me my interest in youth work. So we're just doing a project with them where the young people have looked at Blake's images and they're now creating their own versions of the images to do murals in a very busy tunnel thoroughfare that connects one part of town with the other. So there's lots of that going on, and long may it continue, and long may it get better and more resource once we get this working group going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And I should say at this point, please sign up for the Cottage Trust newsletter. You're getting information through the Blake Society newsletter, which Tamsin does for us. But the Cottage Trust newsletter is very easy to find on the website. Nathan, please.
Well, hello, Doug. What a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. And actually, while you were going, I realized that there was an Instagram clip that you showed. And so I ran over to the cottage Instagram account and see that it's posted there. So I had no idea. Let me explain to everyone. I've been trying to help. I'm in Los Angeles. I've been trying to help with organizing some efforts to reach larger scale donors in the U.S. And I've been working with Doug for a couple of months on how to do that. We need an American tax a tax number to pull it off, and we finally figured that out. So Doug, just so you know, Melanie and I are meeting again in New York in a couple of weeks, and we're in communication right now to try to get the new email for American donors back up. And it's good to know about the Instagram account because clips are helpful these days. Video seems to be God in fundraising, and so it's great to see that you've got some clips on there. There's also, I see a link to a donation opportunity that's on the Instagram account. And we can talk later about maybe that might be useful to have a U.S. donors option on that as well as we start to kind of get back to cranking up reaching U.S. donors. But I can't wait to get back to Felpham after an incredible visit last year, and it's just thrilling to see things moving forward. But we've got some big mountains to climb still, don't we? So thank you so much for your leadership, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you for your support, Nathan. Okay. I'm just looking at the chat. There's more thank yous and hopes and expectations to visit the cottage in the near future. Van Morrison. It's Jenny. Jenny, do you want to say more or?
Well, I'll just say that my introduction to Blake came through rock and roll. And when I was 18 or 19, that was really my first contact. And then I dove into Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and I was gone. So I just thinking, rockers have money, and Van Morrison calls out William Blake in more than one song. I just was listening to Common One, and he calls out a lot of romantic poets, but William Blake especially, he shouts out. So yeah, I saw Ian Anderson and got very excited. I think Dylan and both Leonard Cohen and Dylan had some connections to William Blake, and of course Allen Ginsberg's estate. It's nice to hear that that's contributing. So I just reach out to some rockers and people in the poetry world, and I'm sure you've done that, but that was my main thought.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think my problem is I'm not very strong, because what you need to do with some of these rockers and superstars is to pick them up by the ankles and shake them so that their pocket.
So that the money falls out.
Yeah,
Yeah, and catch them in a good mood.
yes.
Yeah. There's more suggestions
Yeah.
in the chat. There's one more person who's raised their
Patty
hand.
Smith, right?
Tamsin, please.
Oh, hi. Amazing presentation. It was fascinating to see that, and it looks so different from when I came down a couple of years ago, to see it with all those support things inside. I was going to say, having done the newsletter for the Blake Society for so long, and in the last one, I put in a thing about a consultation that you're doing, a public consultation, which anyone who gets our newsletter will have seen that note about it. I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about the consultation, and I'll see if I can fish out the link and perhaps drop it into the chat. That would be to know a little bit more about that would be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks very much, Tamsin. I see that there's a hand up from Richard Clemo, who's one of our trustees, who's designed the survey and doing the analytics on it. So I'm sure he could come in on that as well. But it goes back to a couple of the principles really. One is collective effort. This whole project is the expression of a huge collective effort. The trustees, ambassadors, skilled advisors, and workmen, and so on. So to carry that principle through, it needs to be shaped by as many people as possible. So the purpose of our survey is not just to interest people in the project and get their opinions on the direction of travel and the potential, but to genuinely reach out to get people with good ideas to help shape our thinking. And I'm sure everyone on this call would have something really valuable to say through that survey. Organisations can fill it in, individuals can fill it in. It doesn't matter if you're in Los Angeles or Felpham, you can fill it in. This is an internationally significant project which the whole world should be shaping up.
Thank you. And the link, as you will have seen, is in the chat. Richard, please.
Yes, hello. Wanted to pick up on two things. One about rock stars. Wonderful idea. We've actually delivered a personal letter to Patti Smith at a gig in New York, and made various other approaches to other rock stars. But as Doug says, they're very resistant to being turned upside down and shaken. So all I would say is that some of your members might well have avenues that we don't have. So if anyone has any idea about how to get to any of these stars who are so obviously influenced by Blake and admirers of Blake, please let us know, because that could be really, really important. On the survey, yes, I mean, I'm sort of managing the survey. It's been open for just over a week. It's open until the end of May. Last time I looked, we had something approaching 250 respondents, which is good. But I'd like to see, a couple of hundred more at least. So please, thank you for putting the link on the chat. That's great. The survey asks questions in broad terms about what people would like to see, how they think they would like to use it, how the cottage and the garden might be used, what might be done in an arts education community centre. And we're analysing it by the geographical location of where the respondents come from. And it's interesting because there are slightly different emphases depending on where you live. That the people who live close are enthusiastic but concerned about what the development of the centre might involve for the village. We want to be completely sensitive to that. We don't want to push ahead with things that are unsensitive to what is a beautiful, quiet village, but a very crowded village. And we're going to work through all these issues with complete sensitivity in order to come up with something that we hope will excite as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Richard. So the link is in the chat. There's more suggestions in the chat as well. Don't forget to sign up for the Blake Cottage Trust newsletter to be kept informed on developments. It can be found on their website. Are there any more questions? I mean, you can always reach up, Philip.
Okay. Yeah, well, first of all, fantastic stuff. Absolutely brilliant. And the materials are, well, I lived and cycled in that area and as a youth and worked along that coast with artisans and people of that kind. And I'm 500 miles north and I'm somewhat disabled and I'm elderly, but I intend to get down at some point. And just as a footnote, it's almost to do with feet, I suppose, because these fellows had to walk. But there is young men who took to Blake, and he befriended them, and there's considerable art that came out of that. And I just mentioned they called themselves the Ancients, and yeah, I would recommend some link somehow. I can even imagine the possible enthusiast who might actually walk it at some point. But thank you very much. Footnote. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for it's a very good point you make because just opening a cottage, even with an exciting visitor centre, has its limitations. And bear in mind that funders don't want you to have too many limitations so that you fail financially in the future. So we've been having discussions with the green and blue guides in the area. These are people who take tourists to places of interest in Chichester and elsewhere, and we've got potential for having lots of creative links so that the visitor experience of the cottage and the visitor centre could be extended to, for example, going over to the Guildhall in Chichester where he was tried, going over to the wonderful Petworth House near to the courtroom there where he was indicted, going to follow the 10 lovely signposts that are around the areas where he used to walk along the coast and into the Downs, going over to Lavant, which he used to visit, going to the local church with the beautiful stained glass windows and so on. And then we understand that the Fox pub, he rented the cottage from Grindley, didn't he? The landlord of the pub. We have very good relationships with the pub, and they're going to convert some rooms to bed and breakfast type rooms, and they want one of them as a Blake room. So there's all sorts of creative connections that we could make with the ancients who visited, the Hugh Parry who did the tune to Jerusalem. He was down the road in Rustington. Haley's place in Eartham is still there, his big house. So all of that will have to be brought together by the experts on visitor experiences to maximise the impact.
Well, fantastic stuff. I didn't actually mention the key name, and that was Samuel Palmer.
Yeah.
But that whole south country area along there, along with the flint and the thatch and so on, that his mystic paintings, I suppose, in his early phase. Samuel Palmer, major world artist. So they followed on from the old man.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Thank you again.
Thank you. Nathan, we have time for one more question.
Aside from museums like the Tate Britain, is there any other place in the world that can be thought of as the home or the center of Blake Blake's history and I mean, is the cottage, in other words, really the number one location in the world to develop as a Blake monument?
Well, I'm biased. I think I have to say yes. I don't know what the latest situation is on South Molton Street to try and liberate the 2 rooms which he rented there. I'm seeing Catherine tomorrow. She's visiting the cottage, but I really don't know what's happened there. But if nothing happens there, and if there's only 2 rooms released, if they're successful in getting that, then the cottage does remain the only monument in the world where Blake and Catherine lived. And we've uncovered their little in the kitchen. We think we've got the original stones where they stepped and so on. So it's got that resonance that nowhere else had. And
I mean, I think of it as a selling point, and actually that we can use it as a selling point before they do anything in South Molton Street, because we're ahead of them. So and I'm just thinking in terms of getting the project in the sight lines of funders here and stuff like that, and being able to speak of it as the essential potential monument to Blake, is really helpful, I think, because anyone who's passionate about Blake will then feel that this is the place where their support should go, right?
Yeah,
anyway, just
a thank you to Nathan, folks. Nathan and his colleagues Melanie and Mark Crosby and so on have been developing our advisory committee in the States. So anyone else online from the States, please get in contact with us or directly to Nathan. It's a great development.
Yeah, and thank you both, Nathan and Doug, for mentioning South Molton Street. Richard?
Just a quick one. I know we haven't got much time, but just picking up on what Nathan was saying there, and Nathan, we are communicating outside this meeting, but just a thought that occurred to me. Does anyone on the line from the States have good media contacts in the States? Because if we could get some stories about the work that's being done in the US press, that could be extremely valuable to us.
I think that's a really good question, and answers can be shared via email, because we are indeed nearing the end of our session. So you can either put them in the chat or email Doug. We're taking note of what's in the chat. I just want to end by saying you are keeping this place, you are keeping this place alive. You're opening a cottage, but through the survey, I think you're also opening a space which all of us can inhabit. So thank you very much, and congratulations, as well as thank you for what you've achieved, and the best of all lucks that exist for everything that's to come. And we'll be there, we'll be coming, we'll be visiting you.